Yeah, we can start also.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Kirti, we can start.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar on challenges and opportunities for health IT management aspirants. Let me introduce myself. This is Dr. Kirti here, who is a second year student of PGDHM in IHMR. I will be your moderator for the evening and also have a moderator, Dr. Vignesh, who will be joining in later. So please join me in extending a warm welcome to our learned speaker, Mr. Kaustav Chatterjee, Associate Director, Frost and Sullivan, and Mr. Harish C. Rijwani, who is a Senior Delivery Manager at CTS Tech. We welcome you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to also introduce our esteemed institute, IHMR. IHMR started in the year 2004. IHMR Bangalore is a specialized institute in management, research, post-graduation, education, and training in the health sector. Ranked as a top hospital management college by Higher Education Review magazine in the year 2017 and 2018. IHMR also received a national award for excellence in education in the category Educational Institute with Best Academics and Industry Interface by World Education Congress, Mumbai in 2020. IHMR is also accredited as a consultancy organization for NABH by the National Accreditation Board for Education and Training, which is NABET Constitute Board of Quality Council of India, QCI. I would also like to take this opportunity to tell more about IHMR Bangalore. IHMR is into research. In research, we have specialists in formative, operation, implementation research, social assessment and impact evaluation, health system strengthening, nutrition, urban and tribal health, maternal and child health, IEC and BCC. In academics, we offer a full-time hospital management 2-year full-time course in PGDM with specialization in hospital management, health IT management, and pharmaceutical management. IHMR also offers consultancy services in quality and accreditation, digital health, due diligence studies, performance improvement, competitor benchmarking studies, voice of customer studies, and CSR. In learning and development, we have the leadership motivation, corporate trainings, digital health, hospital management, research methodology, and statistics, health insurance, nutrition, and stress management, quality, medical, ethics, and legal issues. This is all I have from IHMR. We can also stay updated about IHMR activities by following us on social media platform. Next slide. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce Mr. Kaustav Chatterjee, who is an industry principal at Frost & Sullivan, India. Mr. Chatterjee has over 10 years of expertise, has a front-end healthcare consultant, and won 6 professional awards for driving thought leadership, business development, and global citizenship. Sorry, sir. He's skilled in business strategy, merger and acquisition, market research, product branding, and competitive intelligence. He is an expert at delivering consulting engagements related to health IT, medical devices and imaging, IVF, and pharmaceutical solutions. We welcome you, sir. I would also like to introduce the next speaker of the day, that is Mr. Harish C. Rijwani, who is a Senior Delivery Manager at CTS Tech. Mr. Harish has extensive experience over 18 years in delivering value to clients through technology and business services. He has approx 9 years of experience as visiting faculty. In practice, he has provided solutions across various healthcare areas, clinical, revenue cycle management, telemedicine, analytics, and in non-clinical like HR payroll, finance, and supply chain. He has authored many books like Begin Your Health IT Journey, Technology to Business, The Invisible Gap, Master the Mystic Arts, The Journey Begin, and published various articles at national and international levels. A very warm welcome to you also, sir. You can, as I had told earlier, we can follow us also on Facebook, social media platform like Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram. So I hand it over to Dr. Vignesh, who will be taking it forward.
Good evening, sir. Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Vignesh. I've done my undergraduate in the field of dentistry, and I'm currently pursuing my PGDM in IIHMR Institute of Bangalore, and my core specialization is health IT. So, as we all know, the industry 4.0 is mainly enabling information and communication technologies that are completely changing both the world's services and production. This is especially true when it comes to the health domain sector, where the Internet of Things, cloud, EOG computing, and big data technologies are revolutionizing not just health as its whole, but its whole ecosystem, and moving slowly towards healthcare 4.0. So I welcome our esteemed speakers for the day, and sir would like you to throw a light on the healthcare IT sector and the scenario currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Vignesh. Hello, everyone. Good evening. I hope everyone is staying safe and staying healthy at the same time. So my name is Kaustubh Chatterjee. As mentioned earlier, I'm working as a principal at Frost & Sullivan. Currently, I spearhead the digital health program on behalf of Frost & Sullivan. And today, I'm really privileged and honored to have the opportunity to connect with students who are specializing in healthcare information technology. I think we can all agree on this panel and everyone who is watching us today that the future of healthcare is digital. And when you are talking about the digital transformation of healthcare and life sciences, the role of healthcare information technology is absolutely critical. So it's really an honor for us to share our experience at Frost & Sullivan, what we have been doing for last 60 years in this market. I've been working for just 6 years, but then the company has operated in the market research domain over 60 years. We just completed our 60th anniversary this year. So I'm very proud really to represent Frost & Sullivan and talk about my experience collaborating with healthcare leaders across the world. So when I joined Frost & Sullivan back in 2015, I was working as a senior analyst, and my job was to work very closely with primarily North American healthcare information technology companies that were catering to payer, provider, pharma, medical device communities. And the kind of projects we are getting were very similar to how a digital transformation project would look like. Meaning we would get questions around how to integrate, let's say, electronic medical record, which is really a legacy platform capability, with progressive capabilities such as population health management, revenue cycle management, clinical decision support, etc. Just to meet the overall objective of a provider to offer precise medical intervention to a defined patient population across the care continuum. So we were getting questions that were broad, that were significant enough, that were going to impact a lot of people, millions of people at the same time. And our job at Frost & Sullivan was to really understand the growth opportunities our clients have in the digital health domain. I'll talk about the big growth opportunity aspect a little later, but let me start with the basic. Of course, the global digital health market or healthcare IT market, so to speak, although we combine healthcare IT and non-healthcare IT within the broader digital health portfolio. But just to address your question on healthcare IT, we believe that globally the healthcare IT market is roughly worth about $150 to $200 billion. And in the North American market, consolidates 70 to 75% of it. Within North America, we primarily consider US and Canada, and US would, within the North American domain, would consolidate up to 50 to 60%, even 70% of the digital health market. In that context, today, the US healthcare IT market is worth somewhere between $100 to $120 billion. And just to put things into perspective, in India, our average annual healthcare budget is somewhere between 65,000 crore to 1 lakh crore. That is just about 10 to 15 billion US dollars. So just the healthcare IT market's potential in North America is 10 times India's annual healthcare GDP, the budget for healthcare. And when you put this into perspective against the healthcare budget that North America has, annually they touch somewhere between $3 to $4 trillion. That is 3 times India's annual GDP, right? So they spend more on healthcare IT, 3 times actually, than our overall annual GDP. So it's very important for all of us to keep this in mind, especially students who are specializing in healthcare IT. They should be aware of the fact that in terms of opportunities, North America definitely is one of the key focus areas for you. And the good news for us is, people who are struggling to find a job in North America, especially in the US, due to changes in regulations and protocols and the geopolitical tension, etc., you don't have to worry at all, because even if you can specialize in healthcare IT and still are based out of India, you will have tremendous growth potential in terms of your career aspiration in India itself. The whole world, especially the healthcare IT domain, is now following what ICT companies did 15, 20 years ago. Think about the information communication technology domain, the likes of Infosys, all other companies like TCS and Accenture and Cognizant, right? They have all created this back-end outsourcing conglomerates, and 90% of the revenue are generated or supported by people in India. Now, the healthcare IT industry is also waking up to that reality, and they believe that, yes, India is a talent hub. The kind of engineers we have here with the management degree and with the clinical background like all of you, this is really a perfect opportunity for global healthcare IT companies to procure talent, which are not cheap, by the way. There is no consideration of cost here. It's all about talent. It's all about the willingness to make an impact at a global level. And healthcare IT stakeholders globally recognize that fact and understand that India is right now at that particular stage where they can offer skilled resources who are eager to make an impact at a global level. So I understood it very, very early in my career. I didn't have a healthcare background. When I started off, I had a BSc degree on computer science and statistics, followed by an MBA in strategy and marketing. I started working with a company called Bero & Corporate in Chennai, which was specializing in supply chain consulting for big pharma companies. And at that particular role, I realized the importance of IT in healthcare and pharma, because essentially what I was doing was helping pharma companies procure digital services from either marketing agencies or healthcare IT companies. So I really quickly understood that how important this category is in terms of spend that healthcare IT companies or hospitals are making towards IT procurement. I started reading a lot of articles, producing articles online, interviewing people like all of you are doing right now, just to get my name out there, just to get the visibility which we all need. Because especially when you come from a similar background where you're basically at disadvantage because you don't have a clinical background, you don't have a medical degree, you're not an MBBS, BDS, etc. You have to have that kind of flair, or at least interest, to take that next step and specialize in healthcare IT. So thankfully, I got a call from Frost & Sullivan, and the rest is history, because for the last 6 years, I have got tremendous experience working with different stakeholders, starting off with North America, but now my role is global. I work very closely with our APAC stakeholders and European stakeholders. So just to give you a broad perspective that yes, the future of healthcare belongs to digital, belongs to IT, and it depends on your expertise. It depends on your core objective of making an impact and where you want to place yourself, your career. I'm sure you all will have a very successful journey ahead. Okay, now let me quickly move on to the core aspect of healthcare IT. Okay, so I briefly gave you an overview of the career aspect of healthcare IT. Let me get into the specifics now. I told you that the US healthcare IT market is worth somewhere between 100 to 120 billion. And the major healthcare IT sectors can be classified as either legacy solutions or progressive solutions. Now, legacy solutions are referred to capabilities that, US-based health systems, including hospitals, accountable care organizations, integrated delivery networks, physician practices, ambulatory group practices, what they have been utilizing for decades to either report clinical conditions or to manage revenue or to support administrative processes. And this include electronic medical record, revenue cycle management platforms, clinical decision support solutions, and supply chain analytics. But there are technologies that are coming up today and creating next generational impact across wide vertical of those legacy capabilities. One example is obviously artificial intelligence. We all are aware of the impact AI is already having across different IT workflows. And they are also making an impact on legacy workflows as well, just to make them more modern. And from vision standpoint, AI is really creating that next generation growth pipeline for hospitals, insurance companies, healthcare IT companies that are collaborating with each other just to ensure that their solutions remain relevant at the eyes of their customers. So at a broad level, these progressive capabilities can be further categorized as either clinical IT solutions or non-clinical IT solutions. When I say non-clinical IT solutions, oftentimes, people confuse healthcare IT with IT solutions that are applied only for clinical purposes. However, you have to remember that the non-clinical IT market is as big, if not more, than the clinical IT market. So that includes workforce automation, that includes smart procurement, that includes supply chain automation, that includes analytics of operational services, that includes documentation, payment authorization, clinical coding, claims denial management, pre-authorization, etc. So please keep this in mind that the scope of healthcare IT is much, much broader than just the clinical aspect of healthcare. And even if you decide to, let's say, build your career in a non-clinical IT market, I'm sure you would be as successful as otherwise. So I'll just quickly stop here and ask if you have any questions. Vignesh, do you have any question for us?
You already have thrown a light on the US and the Canadian health sector.
Yep.
Sir, if possible, could you just do an in-depth analysis on what are the particulars needed for the particular job sectors?
Particular what? Could you repeat?
For a certain jobs sector, the jobs in the health IT sector, what are the skills or the upgrades that the students or anyone should acquire pursuing in health IT sector?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And we have another panel member, Mr. Harish, and he can really throw great light on that because he's working as a senior IT executive with a very reputed healthcare IT company. So more than me, he's more qualified really to talk about it. But then from my perspective, what I can really convey is the kind of skills you really need to shine in healthcare IT. Some of that you already have. You have a clinical background. You're doing an MBA on top of it. You're connecting with industry stakeholders way early in your career and trying to really find out the opportunities that persist for you and how you can transform your career. So you've already taken that step. The next step for you would be to now understand your priorities. So based on your background, do you want to be in coding, for example? Although coding is not absolutely essential for all a healthcare IT role. However, if you are interested in actually building software solutions, new software solutions, or making existing software solutions more user-friendly, that's a separate skill set that you have to acquire because you don't come from that background. I assume that. However, on the other end, if you want to stay in the strategy side, right? If you want to be a consultant like all of us, like in the Frost & Sullivan team or in other companies, right, of similar nature, what they're offering is really very similar, to be honest with you. What we offer and how we differentiate at Frost & Sullivan against our competitors is all our projects are focused on growth opportunities. Recently, just the day before yesterday, we had a briefing session with one of the leading Indian IT companies. And it's an Indian IT company that has global presence. They have multiple verticals that they're focusing on, but healthcare is one of their priorities. So they came on board and asked questions around where we can find the next billion-dollar opportunity. So they had a growth goal internally that currently their revenue is somewhere between $3 to $5 billion. That's the corporate revenue, including all sectors. And they wanted to grow this business to a $15 billion business in next 5 years. So that's a growth goal of $10 billion in 5 years. For a company that is 3 to 4 decades old and the current revenue is 5 billion, to grow its revenue 2x in just 5 years is a phenomenal growth goal, right? And they identified 4 industry verticals that can really address that growth goal for them at a corporate level. And healthcare was one of them. There was automotive and defense, there was mobility, there was ICT, of course, which is their core business. But then healthcare was a very important sector for them. And they thought that healthcare could actually add up to $2 to $3 billion to their $10 billion growth target over the next 5 years. So we came on board and we started really brainstorming ideas that within the healthcare ocean, what are the components that they should be able to specialize on or they should be able to offer and where the synergy lies. Because for $1 billion company, you don't really come on board and randomly recommend something where there is no alignment with their existing portfolio or existing capabilities. You need to find a balance and offer or suggest capabilities that complement their existing assets or maybe future intention, right? So we first had to understand where they fit in, what are the services or IT capabilities they have right now in the healthcare sector. And based on that assessment, we came on board with an idea of 4 specific healthcare IT assets that could unlock 12 growth opportunities worth $55 to $76 billion in next 5 years. And that's a global total addressable market potential. And we said that that's the total addressable market. Similar to you, there will be hundreds of other companies operating in that space. So even if you can capture just 5% of that market or 10% of that market over 5 years, you can still address your growth goal from healthcare standpoint. So in order to be successful in a project like that, the skill set that you need to have is having a broader mindset, having the opportunity to think like a CEO thinks, right? These are cliche statements, I understand that. But because we practice it on a daily basis, we really understand the meaning of it. So moving forward, just don't think about India alone. Don't think about just one state or one country. Think about the global impact that this technology can have. Not think about just a few thousand patients or few lakhs patients. Think about millions of patients, how they can benefit. Because unless you create an IT asset that is scalable, that can address the broader pain point of millions of patients at the same time, that IT asset that you're building can never become a unicorn IT asset, or that can never be valued at a unicorn status. And I'm just talking about the valuation. I'm not talking about the revenue because I'm thinking from the startup angle. So the skill set that you need to have if you're playing in the strategy field is think big, think about the larger impact, think global. And from analytics standpoint, from core certification standpoint, definitely it helps to have that digital health background in terms of having a certification on analytics or coding, or just to Excel, plain Excel. And Harish did a session with Frost & Sullivan a couple of weeks ago, and he really opened our eyes because we do a lot of Excel modeling, but he came on board and he showed us exactly how it should be done because he does that for CTS Tech. And that really opened our eyes, and we had to discuss with our corporate managers and all that. Do we have to change our forecasting model, keeping that in mind? So those kind of skill sets are extremely important, and that can really help you move into a direction where you're actually making an impact by working on the execution side or implementation side. But if you want to play in the strategy side where you're just working as a consultant or a market research analyst, then just think big, think global, and have a larger impact.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have a question for Harish, sir. Sir, could you throw a light on the overview of the health sector in the Middle East and the Asian region?
Sure. So like Kaustubh mentioned, he talked about specifically how the US healthcare is way ahead in terms of the entire world, right? I'll look at 2 parameters over here just to explain what are the different market opportunities you might see within the other regions. There is, I'm not sure if you've heard of HIMSS. It's a body. There's a website also. There's called HIMSS Analytics, and they have a EMR adoption model, which is looked at by almost every country. So there are 7 stages of EMR adoption from 0 to 7, right? Technically there are 8, but they call it from stage 0 to stage 7. So 0 stage is that you don't have any EMR system at all. There is nothing implemented. Stage 1 is that you have implemented system for 3 ancillaries, that is your lab, radiology, and the pharmacy. And then you go ahead, you integrate the data between these 3 systems, then you implement another system. And ultimately, when you reach stage 6 and stage 7, you're completely digital. So when I look at the data, and you can actually check this data on HIMSS Analytics website, you will find that when I look at inpatient EMR adoption, that is for hospitals, not for outpatient. When I look at the EMR adoption for hospitals in US, you will find 2000 plus hospitals which are there in stage 6 and stage 7. When I compare that to Asia, China has approximately 40 plus who are in stage 6 and stage 7. Saudi Arabia has approximately 25 plus. Thailand has 7. Russia has 1. There's none in India at this point of time. When I look at the outpatient EMR adoption model, you will find that in US, there are more than 16,000 clinics, outpatient clinics, which are in stage 6 and stage 7. Comparatively, when I look at China, it has only 4. Saudi Arabia, it has only 16. And India still doesn't figure in that list at this point of time. But yes, when you look at an opportunity, right, if you might say that, okay, the US market is getting saturated, there are 2 ways to look at it. One, US, like Kaustav said, US has that spending power. They are investing in digital health. India has recently started in the past 2 years, right? They started coming up with new policies. If you look at NHP, if you look at National Health Policy website, you will find that there is also a patient portal out there. You can actually create your own digital record. You can go on the site. You can actually create your own digital record if you want to. There are certain mobile apps which they have also launched. So it's more about, and for India, because we have the technical firepower, it will be very easy for us to implement in the future. So you can look at it in 2 ways. If the policies are going to support, I think India will be able to implement all of these stuff very easily. You have that network in place, you have that technical firepower. It's more about getting people trained in the right manner, getting the software in the right language, and people should be able to use it. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, because you'll see that US has implemented so many things. There's definitely an opportunity within the Middle East, within the Asian market. There's definitely a lot of opportunity. The other point which Kaustav also mentioned is that digital health is not only limited to clinical areas. So I'll talk about specifically supply chain. When you're looking at supply chain, within US, there is a concept of group purchasing organization. I have not yet seen an organization like a GPO within India at this point of time. And just to give a concept, I was working with this hospital. It is one of the largest US hospitals. It has 200 plus hospitals under it. You know, like Apollo has a lot of clinics in India. They have 200 plus hospitals among it. So imagine they want to buy beds. 200 hospitals into, let's say, if each of them even have 200 beds, 200 into 200, that's a big number, right? You want to buy beds, what will you get? You will get that buying advantage. You'll be able to tell the vendor to get a discount. So what they do is they ask other hospitals to join their network. And they tell them, I will not charge you anything, but they take money from the vendor. Because why? For the vendor, their invoice amount is going to increase, right? The number of things that this hospital is going to order is going to increase. So again, GPO is a concept, but it is supported by an underlying digital software. Right? There are a lot of things which are there, which help. There are discounts given by vendors if you pay the money within 30 days. And many a time what happens is that the hospital loses out on these discounts because of a manual intervention, because the invoice is not being scanned and put in the system. So there are a lot of things, a lot of opportunities which I see not only from a clinical perspective, but also from a non-clinical perspective. And there's definitely space for everyone to get involved. If you have the right mindset, you have the right thinking, like Kaustav also talked about it. He talked about a lot of points. If you're able to focus on those elements, you will definitely be able to get into that. Even when I look at telehealth, telemedicine, that's a growing space across the globe. It's not only limited to the Middle East or the the Asian market.
Thanks a lot, sir, for your query. Moving on.
Yeah, just to add to Harish's point on non-clinical IT assets, there is another area which is not often talked about, but it is one of the biggest areas in healthcare IT. That is the quality performance monitoring and reporting. So every hospital in the US is mandated to report their clinical utilization rates, their financial attributes to CMS or the private payer they're enrolled in on a quarterly basis at an episode of care level, right? So I'm talking about reporting of clinical utilization at an episode of care level, meaning if a patient was admitted to one condition and the patient has multiple comorbidities, for the impending condition and the comorbidities, the hospital is required to report that outcome result to CMS almost on real-time basis. Now, how do you do that when you're managing at a time lakhs of patients across your network? Without IT, you cannot do that. Without automation, you cannot do that. And then you have to do it efficiently, because that would depend, that would actually decide whether next year you will get the same level of ranking as a hospital. Because in the US, what happens is they're given a star ranking. 3-star, 4-star ranking to every hospital. And based on that rank, they negotiate their prices with their insurance companies. So if a hospital is highly ranked and they're very efficient, they're managing millions of patients, and the outcome results are fantastic, better than the national average, they can always claim a little higher price point for the same surgery performed by other hospitals. And that's advantageous for them, because then they can pay a little more to their physicians so that they can control and retain them. They can also invest a certain percentage of that additional spend by payers on IT to make their systems better, right? More functional. So these are areas that we don't talk about, but these are extremely important areas. They're generating millions, if not billions of dollars in the US market. And if you want to take this particular concept and apply to another region outside US, definitely that can work. Take the example of UK, for example. NHS controls the entire UK market, right? And NHS also does the same thing. Same here in Canada, right? They have a universal health coverage. So they negotiate their prices every year based on the last year's clinical utilization rates. If it drops, then automatically they will be penalized and they would not get the same amount of funding. You will get the funding depending on the amount of kind of patients you have catered and the outcomes you've driven. So that's again a very important area, and usually that's packaged within an analytics platform or a population health management platform capability, but standalone companies are also offering that capability as a modular vertical capabilities. They will just come in, they will integrate with electronic medical records, CDSS platforms, RCM platforms, collect data at scale. They will contextualize that evidence and create actionable intelligence for different stakeholders across the care continuum to make or take decisions on. And they will report that outcome also at the same time to the respective regulatory agencies. So this is, again, a very important area, and really sky is the limit for healthcare IT in that context.
Thanks a lot, sir. Both Kaustav sir and Harish sir for clearing all the doubts. Moving on will be taken over by Dr. Kirti.
Thank you, Vignesh. And Harish sir and Kaustav, that was quite insightful. That was a real good knowledge that we were not aware of in many of the instances. So moving on. So what are the this pandemic has really thrown education system out of place, or like altogether, with no classroom trainings, no physical interactions between students and teachers. So in this, altogether, technology has played a vital role and savior to keep our learnings and knowledge transfer going through the online platform. In the same line, I would like to ask Harish sir, what are some of the most common challenges faced by management students in healthcare?
So to answer that, right, I'll answer a couple of questions in this. There are some questions in the chat, and I'll answer those along
Sure,
with
sir.
you. Right. So when I'm looking at the challenges, right, there are different types of organizations you might end up joining. Okay, you can join a IT service company, be it CTS Tech, Intel, Atos, Cognizant. These are all IT service providers, and they also have their own IPs and products, but primarily they are IT service providers. You might join a product company, right? You might join a Allscripts or a Cerner or a Sunquest. You might join these kind of companies, or you might join a BPO or a KPO firm like Hinduja Global Solutions is there, or Jebs is there, right? Or you might join a consulting firm like Frost & Sullivan, Deloitte. And finally, you might join the end healthcare organization itself, which is a hospital or an insurance company like Manipal Cigna or any other company for that matter. Right? So when I look at the IT service company, when you join an IT service company, every IT service company has their own training. They train you on healthcare or a specific domain. Right? They have their own 2-week or 3-week training plan, which is there in almost every company. The challenges when you look at it, right, is understanding global healthcare. There are certain organizations like Vital Health, which has been bought over by Philips, and we used to interact with Vital Health a lot when I was in Sintel. And they used to focus specifically on the Middle East market. The business, the domain is different over there. Yeah. As an IT service company, you will find that a lot of focus, like Kaustubh also mentioned, is on the US healthcare. You need to understand the business, how the US healthcare functions. Right? All those terminologies you have to understand. That is one challenge you will face, right, when you're looking at from an IT service organization. If you are looking at it from a product company, the product company can be a product company focusing on specifically healthcare provider. So you need to know the provider workflows. Yeah, some of them use Milliman guidelines. You need to understand all those guidelines. There are certain companies which focus core on the analytics aspect, wherein they are trying to mimic what a medical coder does. That is extracting codes from the notes. Yeah, Nuance, companies like Nuance, they specifically focus on that. They try and automate that element. So again, what is the challenge over there is you need to understand that process. When I go towards a company like a consulting firm, that is a Deloitte or a Frost & Sullivan, their focus is different. Their focus primarily, and Kaustubh can definitely add over here, is analyzing a lot of information, analyzing a lot of data. So here the challenge comes not only from a domain perspective, but also from analyzing a lot of data. You should be apt in using tools like Excel or Tableau or any other Power BI or tools like that, which can help you analyze this data faster. Across all these organizations, if you're working as a consultant, yeah, every organization is going to focus on what should I do next. They're going to keep an eye on a lot of regulatory changes, because these regulatory changes help you decide that, okay, is the CIO of this hospital going to invest money in telehealth? Is the CIO of the hospital going to invest money in RPA or robotic process automation or something else? Okay. Like India has this till 2025, they have their entire plan, their national digital health, they have their entire roadmap that is going to make organizations invest over here. Yeah. So if you look at every organization, right, what should I focus on? What should I build for the future? Ultimately, that is what is going to take you for a faster growth path. Now, you might work on the delivery side. If you're working on the delivery side within the organization, within any of these organizations, you'll definitely also need to understand what is agile, all those terminologies. How do you execute a project? Here, there are two specific groups. One is a group which is going to help you identify opportunities, create small solutions, sell that to the customer, and there's going to be a bigger team in the background who's going to execute this solution, who's going to implement this solution. That's what Kaustubh mentioned earlier, right? So if I look at the different challenges, right, each of these organizations provides you with a different challenge. If you are working with the end hospital, let's say you're working with Hinduja Hospital or Manipal Cigna, their focus is going to be different, right? They might not implement the solution, they might not build these solutions internally. There you might have to interact with different vendors to identify which solution will work for you the best. So when I look at the challenges, I don't think I can generalize that, okay, you will face X, Y, Z challenge. But when I look at different entities that you might end up joining, I see the challenges in this perspective. And there are some questions also which I kind of answered. And one question, which was there right in the chat, was what are the different roles for people from a either it be it a clinical or a non-clinical background. If you are from a clinical background, you can start as a business analyst, right? That's the junior most level. From a business analyst, you can become a consultant. If you're working in a product company, you can become a product consultant, that you are an expert at billing, right? If you're working in a KPO firm, you will become a process consultant. You understand how claim denials happen, how do you avoid claim denials. All those elements can come into picture. Ultimately, after a certain amount of experience, you can start managing a team. If you're from a non-clinical background and you have a technical aspiration, right, you can definitely grow in a different path. You can become techno-functional. You need not, a non-clinical person need not be that he or she does not understand the clinical domain. I am a BE electronics, by the way. I am not a doctor or a clinician. So I have understood the domain over the years. And being a techno-functional person will probably give you an advantage that you not only understand the technology, you also understand the business, and you're able to bridge that gap between the two. So yes, hopefully that answered some of the questions which are there, as well as answered your question in terms of the challenges.
Yes, sir. It was really helpful. So I would like to ask Kaustubh, sir, what are some of the common challenges faced by management students while working on overseas projects?
That's a good question. So there are a lot of challenges we face on a daily basis. And one of the common challenges was understanding the know-how of clients' business while working on projects that relate to local regulations. Especially sitting in India, even though it doesn't matter how much you read and what sources you refer, you tend to always miss out on a couple of regulatory nuances. So imagine a scenario, you're working for a project for a client in Middle East. And in one of the countries in Middle East, they want to know whether it's possible to create data centers outside their country and then exchange information, patient information with different countries in a cross-border IT architecture framework format, and allow businesses to interact with each other and understand also how the patients from that market, that particular country, understand that information. So in a similar situation, you often find it very difficult to understand what should be made possible and what should not be made possible. Because think about it, you are talking about a project where you're working directly with the policymakers. The recommendations that you will make or have for the policymaker will potentially be implemented for that country. And from that point on, the country will follow that process, the country will follow that policy, and the entire business framework will evolve around that particular policy. So you are basically faced with an amazing challenge, pressure, and also at the same time opportunity to create policies that are consistent with international standards. However, the challenge again here becomes a little political in nature. When You want to make policies that are consistent with international policies that are really regarded as gold standard of healthcare IT policy, when really it comes to managing information in a cross-country ecosystem format. You really have to encourage politicians and policymakers to really up their game and focus more on the bright side of it, rather than focusing too much on protecting data and not allowing everyone to control your information. Of course, with IT, you have all the means and opportunities now to de-identify patient data. No one in the world, even if you create a data center outside your country, would be able to retrieve that information and tag that information to a specific individual if that information is already de-identified and encrypted. So we really had to do a lot of hard work first, explaining the benefits of creating policies that are consistent with international standards, and then going to that next step of identifying business strategies that will help them make that policy a reality. So that's, again, always a challenge. When you work on overseas projects, you have to keep in mind that every market is different. Their cultural and regulatory sensitivities are different. You cannot have just one magic formula that will be applied or that can be applied to every market. Because as a consultant, you have to have that diplomatic attitude of creating solutions tailored to that market, but at the same time, not at the disadvantage of the global market, so to speak. For you, you represent the global healthcare sector. You don't represent a specific country or a specific market. So we had to really, we had to do a lot of hand holding and explaining to the Middle Eastern client that these are the goes and these are the no-goes. These are the things that you can do and these are the things you cannot do. So that's always a challenge. The second challenge is finding right growth opportunities that clients really can fulfill over the next 3 to 5 years time period. There are consulting firms out there, and I'm talking only from the consulting background standpoint because Harish is focusing on the IT and execution part. So I would rather be in the strategy side. So again, on the strategy side, a challenge that we face is when we accept a project, because nowadays, we get the opportunity to see what clients are really looking for. We also participate in RFPs where we compete with other consulting firms. Clients come in and they share a brief agenda of their growth plan, and then we create our sales pitch, meaning the proposal, and then we pitch that proposal, we present along with other competitors. And then depending on the billing, the bios of the people who would be part of the project, and the strength of the proposal overall, most importantly, a project would be awarded to that particular company. So in that context, oftentimes what happens is there are Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies that are really forward thinking in nature. So they would come in and suggest a project, and they want to invest in a technology that will probably come into picture 30 years from now, 35 years from now. They're thinking way ahead, right? They're called moonshot projects. So they're thinking moonshot projects. They're right now allocating resources, investing on capabilities that they can fulfill over the next 20, 25, 30 years time. But what we do at Frost & Sullivan, we do that. We create a lot of, proposals and we pitch to projects where we are creating the entire smart city landscape. We have done that. Recently, we've done that last year with Hyderabad. We created the entire smart city landscape. We also do that in Singapore. But then most of the projects that we get a little short-term in nature, meaning we cater to clients' immediate goals. And when we take on those projects, we find the challenge of first classifying whether this could be implemented within the next 3 to 5 years or not, because based on that, we would take the decision of actually proposing for that project or not. But that's again a challenge for us. But then when the challenge is eliminated and we are sure that this is a project that will have a significant impact within a shorter time frame, let's say 3 to 5 years or 5 to 7 years, we definitely come on board. The third is managing time zones. This is a tactical thing, but a very important consideration. When you work on overseas projects, deadlines don't matter. But what really matters is being available on meetings, being available on brainstorming sessions that can really be on odd times, especially if you're working on multi country ecosystem where you're also managing case team members from, let's say, Australia, and then you have someone coming in from Canada. At the same time, you have someone coming from Germany. For example, the digital health team that I spearhead, we have 4 analysts. One right now is in Canada, another one is in New York, I'm in India, another one is also in India. And in fact, the other colleague that I have, he just joined, he's an alumni of IIHMR as well. It's Dr. Rishi Pathak. He was working with IQVIA and he just joined Frost & Sullivan a couple of months ago. So definitely you should also reach out to him and do a session with him. And he can provide great insight being an alumni of IIHMR. So we need to be present all the time. We need to be active all the time. And when you're part of a meeting, you just cannot just dodge off, right? You have to be on an A game. You have to prepare for each meeting. So if the meeting is at, let's say, 10 p.m. or 10:30 p.m. or 11 p.m., still you have to look presentable. You have to have all the data points in your fingertip. So we have this common rationale within Frost & Sullivan, kind of a joke that if someone wakes you up in the middle of the night, you still need to have all the numbers remembered, right? You need to be able to say those numbers and offer a growth opportunity right off the bat. So that is always a challenge for people who are not used to that kind of work atmosphere, managing time zone. And then the final, being mindful of cultural differences across functional team. I'm talking about internal functionalities. When you're working with different people from different countries and they're citizen of those countries, it becomes extremely important to understand and be mindful of their cultural nuances, cultural background, because sometimes we take things very lightly. We think, okay, let's go. I mean, okay, it's fine, we can do it tomorrow. But then there are people from other markets who take things very seriously. And I'll just stop here by sharing a quick example. It was an embarrassing moment for me. I was new at Frost & Sullivan at that time, and I had a meeting with our head of Japan country. So he came on a call. So the call was supposed to happen with me and the entire Japan healthcare team of Frost & Sullivan, and it was chaired by the head of Japan as a country from Frost & Sullivan. It was early in the morning because they start early, and obviously it's like 7 a.m. for me. It's 10 a.m. or something like that for them. I just, I joined the meeting, I think 3 minutes after 7 a.m. So I joined, I think 7:03, and everyone left. When I joined, it was just the head of Japan on the call, and there was no one on the call. And the head of Japan told me that you should really apologize to everyone who joined the call for you, because in Japan, unless there's an earthquake, we don't come on meetings late. So you were 3 minutes late. That's a big deal for us. And everyone, I think 21 people joined that day, and everyone left, even if I could join after 3 minutes. So that day, I learned the lesson that people are different in different markets. We cannot judge a book by its cover, but at the same time, we cannot take things for granted, and we have to be professional at the same time. So these are the core challenges that would really be applicable to all of you when you're working on overseas project and working with cross-functional teams as well.
Thank you, sir, for this industrial insights. I would like to hand it over to Vignesh for the round 3 of questions.
So as you had spoken, this question goes out to Harish sir. Sir, you already mentioned about the skills that are required. I would like you to just throw a light on the various skills that soft skills, technical skills, managerial skills that management students would particularly need to land them into health IT sector in particular. If you could throw us a light on that, it would be great, sir.
So yeah, soft skills, obviously, yes, communication is the biggest skill. In any industry, anywhere, if you're good in communicating your idea, communicating your thought well, it will not take you long to move ahead. So that is one. Second, in terms of tool, if you're from a clinical background, right, I would recommend tools which are more from a BI reporting perspective. Because ultimately it depends what is the role you are targeting. If you are going to say that, okay, I learn coding, there is no value in terms of why are you even doing your MBA to a certain extent. Right? You are doing an MBA because you want to get into the management kind of a role. Learning technology is good. You should. I'm not saying you don't learn coding. Yeah, it learn. But how are you going to use it is going to be important. Right? Do you want to become a solution architect? That is why you're learning coding. Or you want, in terms of a solution architect, there also the business is important. Right? But I would recommend tools that will help you if you really want to get into a consulting firm, or even if you are working in a service industry, right? Tools like Tableau, Excel, wherever you can visualize and showcase your analysis is going to help. PowerPoint, definitely not the PowerPoint which is completely all text, right? It's not a reading deck, right? It's more in terms of how do you present it. That's going to help you. The other element which I would definitely recommend is how do you really showcase your experience. Yeah, there are some questions related to working with doing internships, right? Doing internships is one thing. You get that experience. The other thing you might also get is, do I really want to work in such an organization, right? You'll also get that kind of perception. But nowadays there are a lot of collaboration required. Okay, when I'm saying collaboration, it's about how do you really think, how do you get that idea. If you are able to generate an idea and implement it, that kind of thinking will help. So what I would recommend, right, you can also try this, is run a hackathon within your college. I'm not sure if you've done it earlier. You can actually run a hackathon of small groups. You can have industry experts in each group, and you can target a specific solution. That, okay, how do I at least conceptualize the solution, build a prototype and showcase it. It's like doing a small mini Shark Tank of your own and trying to understand that, okay, who's going to buy my solution. You'll actually get the real world implementation of some of these ideas. Why would somebody spend so much money on building your solution? That will give you a real perception in terms of, and you can even try it and sell it to a small hospital, a group of people. You'll realize it's not easy to sell to a hospital. Okay, because the role of, practically speaking, you will find an insurance company spending more money as compared to the hospital, because the role of a hospital is to save the life of the patient. They are not bothered if somebody is capturing the data or not. For them, their goal is quality, care quality, right? That is what is the primary goal. So yes, there are a lot of skills. The more you learn, the better. But you can't keep on learning all the time. Practical experience is going to help you more. In today's world, where even when you're trying to hire people, organizations are running hackathons. Right? So from your perspective, from a business perspective, if you are able to identify, you keep writing, right? If you write something, you look at a target, like Kaustav mentioned, right? There are organizations which are looking at 30 years down the line. But I'm not telling you look 30 years down the line. You will be graduating in a year or two. 1 year down the line, what would people be focusing on? What should they be investing in? If you start thinking in that direction, writing about it, you'll already be ready for an interview. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Thanks a lot for that, sir. That was great. You just briefed us on all the skills needed. Sir, moving on to, there's a question to Kaustav, sir. Sir, what is your thought on the AL and ML interventions in the health sector? And how do you see this, sir, moving forward?
Yeah. So this is a good question, also a controversial one, because some people are of the opinion that AI definitely is creating meaningful impact in healthcare across all different IT workflows. And some people are also of the opinion that AI, in the context of India at least, is way too far-fetching, and really it doesn't have too much relevance today in the context of how healthcare is delivered in India and similar countries around the world. This is really at the discretion and privilege of Western markets where systems are already in advanced maturity level. I think Harish, during the beginning of his speech, mentioned the EMR adoption level from 0 to 7. That's actually the maturity level of EMR implementation. And when you plot different countries across that 7 layers and you create a heat map of where the countries fit in terms of their adoption of EMR and utilization and optimization of EMR capabilities, you would see only, let's say, 5 or 6 countries achieving that 5th to 6th level of maturity of the EMR, overall 0 to 7 maturity, great. But most of the countries would fall between 1 to 3, right? And people who are saying that because we're still at that 1 to 3 level, and I'm just giving the EMR example because that is widely considered as the mother of all healthcare IT product. That is really the core of healthcare IT in the context of how hospitals invest in IT solutions. So I'm just giving that example to substantiate my logic that most people who are of the opinion that AI is still not a meaningful technology for developing markets or markets where they need to first take that first step of achieving the goal of having higher adoption of IT in the first place. And then, obviously, AI will come later, right? First, you need to have that basic infrastructure in place. You need to have an ecosystem through which you collect information. And the success of AI, really, people who know AI would agree to the point that success of AI depends on the amount, the degree, and the quality of data you already have with you. Because you create the algorithm based on the underlying assets or evidence that you've already captured over years. Western markets have done that well because of their early movers advantage. They could really capture patients' evidence, and through data lakes, now they're having insight around each and every person in those markets and how those people suffered from different conditions. What are their health conditions now? Where they're suffering from 5 years, 10 years from today, and what are they at risk of in 5 years from today? So because they have this evidence, they could create those AI algorithms and create separate workflows. So to answer your question, yes, AI definitely has use cases, but it is limited to markets where the majority of digital health is higher. AI has use cases across the clinical domain, financial domain, and operational domain. And we have hundreds of examples of companies operating in this space, offering AI capabilities. And the interesting part is the legacy IT companies, the makers of electronic medical records, revenue cycle management platforms, population health management platforms, the likes of Allscripts, Optum, Cerner, Epic, they all run, Athena Health included, they all run a partner program today. And what is a partner program? Partner program is basically the ecosystem through which this legacy players collaborate with third-party developers. Third-party developers can create a solution exclusively for their solution, or they can offer the capability they built through API. And in this way, the legacy companies can achieve the desired goal of being modern, being a next generation by working with those companies. So most of the companies that are incorporating AI solutions in their workflows across clinical, financial, and operational domains are either working by building solutions from scratch in-house, or in most cases, working with third-party developers, and they're bringing them under a common umbrella or a portfolio of all developers, and they are giving them the agenda and the goal of their solution. And this is where my solution today, these are the users of my solution, this is how they use the solution, and this is where I want to go with the solution. Meaning, when we talk to our customers, they say that, okay, this solution is great. For the last 10 years, it helped us achieve a lot of goals, but as a next step, what I need from your end is to take this technology to the next level, to make it more intuitive, to make it more interoperable, to make it more agile, to make it more light make it more cost effective. And companies cannot do that without collaborating with exceptional third-party developers around the world. And that's why AI is creating a great impact. It is able to collect information at scale, digest it, and at the same time spitting out evidence at scale for different stakeholders at a global level.
I'd like to just add one point from an AI perspective. When you're looking at companies like GE, Siemens, these medical device companies, right, large machines, I think they will be able to implement AI in their systems probably faster as compared to other than it will not probably impact a global market, because in 2019 GE got an approval for one of their AI algorithms to prioritize X-rays, test X-rays. Okay, so that's why I'm saying that these companies where it is independent, again it depends on the kind of data that they have, but again a chest X-ray is still going to be much similar across the globe. There might be certain diseases which might be different, but overall from what I've seen, the diagnostics might be easier to target as compared to the others. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and we have some success stories as well, especially in the X-ray domain. If you refer to the Indian company Cure.ai, they have created some FDA-approved AI algorithm that identifies tuberculosis very, very effectively, with a higher degree of specificity than traditional radiology clinical assessments. It's an Indian company, but they're doing exceptionally well. They have gone global now. And I think, if I'm not wrong, they're also working with a couple of these device makers in the back end to create that AI asset on their behalf. So there are other examples like Niramai. It's a Bangalore-based breast imaging company, and they're also sort of working with AI to ensure that the breast images are processed more quickly, more effectively, and with higher clinical specificity and accuracy. So we have great success stories, to take inspiration from. People asked, I think there was a question on the Q&A box around if someone doesn't have the healthcare background or would like to pursue a career in healthcare IT, how they should get started. I think, you can approach these companies in India. You can get some educational session with their corporate heads and understand their journey, right? And then decide internally where you fit in. Do you agree with their vision? Do you believe in their mission? And do you want to be part of their company or not? And then you can take a call, and then you can reach out to them offline or on your own and request for an internship, or maybe just an interaction. I mean, everything doesn't have to turn to an internship, right? And here again, a quick sort of a comment on internship on healthcare IT, internship in general, really in India. People, love to get job done free of cost. So you should be a little careful dealing with those requests. If you're, giving your time, if you're working really as a full-time intern with the company, you should be compensated. If it is not money, it should be something else. And you have to figure out what that should be. So keep that in mind, but then definitely get in touch with these companies, understand their journey so far and their vision for future, and definitely would be able to understand where you fit in and how you can grow your career in future.
Thanks a lot, sir, for a wonderful insight. Like you said, AI and ML technology it'll be easier to even conduct large-scale clinical studies over time, and AI tools can assist in more effective resource planning as well. So it was very resourceful, sir. Moving on, Dr. Kirti will hand over this.
Thank you, Vignesh. In this tough COVID times, everybody is worried about career opportunities. And on the same note, I would like to ask, Kaustav sir, what are the various opportunities for management students in India and US markets? And on the same line, what would an organization expect as a fresher making a career into health IT sector?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll start with your last question. as a fresher, what our industry is really looking for. I think Harish already mentioned that as a fresher, you will start at the bottom of the pyramid as a business analyst or as a process analyst or as a research analyst, depending on, or even product analyst, depending on the company you're part of. If you're part of a research and consulting firm, you will join as a knowledge analyst or a research analyst, and then you will work your way up to becoming a consultant and then principal, director, partner, etc. That's the separate hierarchy. And then if you're working with a product company, definitely they will expect you to know the product really well, have some background in terms of whether you have worked prior to your MBA. I mean, this is again a very important point to remember, that you all are PG students, right? And some of you would have prior experience coming into this program. Leverage that, even if it is a non-healthcare related project or a work experience. Make sure that when you're speaking to the interviewer, make it relevant to the healthcare industry as well, because every industry really is intertwined. And even if you have worked in some other industry, there should be some learning that apply to healthcare as well. Try to have that mindset of understanding what those points are. You have to really prepare with those insights and then bring those insights in front when you're interviewing with your company. Also, try to understand that at a fresher level, you have to do a lot of hard work in terms of data crunching, which also Harish mentioned earlier. The likes of IQVIA and Frost & Sullivan and Deloitte, PwC, KPMG, all big 4 and Y at a junior level, they will make you work on a lot of data points. It could be Excel sheets going into tens of tabs or hundreds of tabs at the same time. So it makes sense for you to have some proficiency over Excel or advanced Excel, because you will be working on them very frequently. Also, report writing. I think we don't really place a lot of attention on writing skills. That is extremely important. Even if you're working in healthcare IT, if you're writing reports, or even if you're writing or even designing a product for that context, you have to have a superior writing skill. So write, read all the time. Read articles, read good articles from reputed sources, from credible sources, and then try to write and have a professional, writing skill. That would really help. And third is obviously soft skills. When you're joining as a fresher, how you're collaborating with your teams, your partners, and delivering projects also create a very good impression and really create a good potential for you. I joined when I was just 23 years old. I started working from 23. I'm just 32 now, and over the last 9 years, I've really slogged really hard to achieve some sort of a credibility in healthcare. Because again, I didn't come from that healthcare background, and trust me, every time I have to send my bio to a potential client who is giving me a project, I do face this question all the time that, okay, you are not from the healthcare background, you're not a doctor, you're not an MD, would you be able to do justice to this? And then I come forward with my expertise, my past projects, my articles, my all the sort of mentions I had on media, etc., to substantiate my point on my behalf. So I think at a junior level, you have to create all those assets. The good part is you all have that healthcare background already. And that's a great opportunity to take that next step. You're already at a much better situation or position than we were. And another good part is healthcare IT. People are talking about healthcare IT today. I mean, 10 years ago, when I graduated, I did MBA in 2012, people were not aware of healthcare IT. People were not talking about healthcare IT enough, right? And the concept of digital health was unheard of. But people are now aware. There are startups out there. They're already getting unicorn status. There's one company called Innovasa that was a Hyderabad-based company, and they started, from Hyderabad, and then a couple of years later, they, opened an office in San Francisco, and now they're valued at $1.3 billion in just 5 years. The last fundraise was $103 million or something like that. So it's an open market, it's a known market. You all have clinical background. You don't have to worry. Just work hard and focus on the larger objective of where you want to go, and then do multitasking today to achieve that goal in 3 years, 5 years.
Thank you so much, sir. Moving on, I would like to ask Harish, sir, like, as you have won several awards in team member segment, what advice would you give for our management students to become an excellent team player?
So I'll give you my own experience, right? When I started off my career, I was very quiet. I hardly spoke with anyone, right? And in the first year, I got a feedback from my team lead that people are very scared to talk to you. I'm very serious. We had this big monitor we had. When I joined in, we had a 386 computer. I'm not even sure if you've heard of it. 286, 386. These are processors, right? Pretty old machines. So when I joined in, it was very, I'm in general not a person who will talk a lot, but if you're telling me that I can speak on healthcare, I'll definitely speak a lot. All right. So from that perspective, it takes a long time, but since you're from a management background, right? You are forced to speak. You don't have an option. You have to speak. You are put in those situations that you have to speak. And when you join, you don't join at a level that I joined. I joined in Sintel as a junior programmer. You are joining actually 4 levels above when I look at it in general. Because you've done your management, you're joining at that level. So when you join, you can't be quiet. You have to be vocal. You have to be open to sharing your ideas. You can't keep them to yourself. And if you want to be successful, you have to be visible to everybody else. That's what everybody says. But the way you create that is need not be just go and stand in front of the manager and tell him blah blah blah, this is my idea. It cannot work that way. Like also mentioned, right? You need to write, you find out ways by which you can literally build your portfolio. And that's what you're doing. You have to start building your portfolio like a photographer builds his own portfolio, that I've taken a photograph of so and so model, etc. Right? That's what you need to do. You need to find out ways in which you can show that I have actually done this. People use, especially from a coding perspective, a lot of developers, they go online, enroll in these hackathons. Right? That's why I was saying you do something similar wherein you are able to showcase your talent, your experience. Just your internship and your projects 5 years down the line is not going to work. Right? So one is definitely be vocal, be proactive. If there is an opportunity that you need to do a research, nobody's putting up with the hand, you should be the one person who will say that, okay, no, I want to do this research. But don't end up taking too many things on your plate. Otherwise, you'll not be able to complete anything at all. Right? So if somebody is sitting late in office, right, and it's like your work is done, you need not, in your initial time, yeah, first year, 1 year, 2 year, somebody sitting late in office, assuming office starts, right, pretty soon. So you need not go, you can actually sit with this person, understand why that person, what is that person doing, can you help that person, right? That gives you an idea, okay, this is also something. The more you talk to people, the more knowledge you're going to get. And ultimately, one thing matters is knowledge is power. If you have that knowledge, you will know, and you have to know when to use that knowledge. You might learn 10 different coding languages, but unless and until you don't know what to use when, it's not going to work. Right? If I have a file which is only 1,000 records, I can simply create a graph in Excel. If I have a file which is 100,000 records, my Excel will hang if I create a graph in it. So that's what I'm trying to say is, one, be proactive, be open to ideas, be vocal. Wherever possible, if you have an opportunity to speak, don't leave that opportunity out. Don't give away that opportunity, be it in front of your manager, be it in front of your customer. Always grab that opportunity to speak. Even though I am shy in terms of, I get scared in terms of speaking, I push myself. If I have an opportunity, I keep looking out for that opportunity. When do I get an opportunity to speak again? Be it with a group, And the larger the group, the more challenging it is going to be for you. So yeah, those are some of the points which I wanted to share.
Thank you so much, sir. Dr. Vignesh will continue from here.
Yes, the floor is open now for the attendees to ask any questions or any queries to the speakers. Any questions? I guess most of the questions were being answered by the sir itself, by both the speakers. There's an important information that I would like to say right now for the attendees. There's a feedback form that's being shared. I request all of you to just kindly fill the feedback form, following which you'll receive a certificate of participation. Thank you. And I would like to conclude the session by thanking our speakers who have, in their busy schedule, taken the time to actually, come to attend this session and throw us their lights on the various aspects of health IT and the job roles and various pertaining elements in the field of health IT sector. So thank you, Mr. Harish. Thank you, Kaustubh sir. So it was a wonderful insight from both of you. We as students learned a lot of important individual characteristics which pertaining to the field which we were unaware of, and I think it would definitely help each one of us in our careers to land ourselves in the field of health IT. Thank you, Mr. Harish. Thank you, Kaustubh sir, for a wonderful time.
Thank you, Dr. Vignesh. Thank you, Dr. Kirti. Thank you, IIHMR Bangalore, for doing an exceptional job of bringing all of them together. I really appreciate all your time today, and I wish everyone is staying safe and staying healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a nice weekend. Bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay.